Okay, let's see here. Okay, I see a couple people here. I am trying to figure out how to get the right microphone going to the stream. Hmm. Okay, let's see. Still not the right microphone. Doesn't look like. I have no idea whether you can hear me or not. David, hi, I see you in the chat. Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right, I am not sure which microphone is working here, but I'm just going to go ahead and start carving. So, what I'm going to do, if you found this on Instagram, you saw my little post about it on Instagram. I'm going to demonstrate how I carve this pattern. This is a large candlestick. So it's a piece of basswood. It's turned on a lathe, and you would put like a tea candle here. But this pattern is sometimes called the wolf's teeth in Romania. I'm not sure if it has names elsewhere, but it's a pattern you see in lots of different parts of the world, all over Europe, Central Africa, the South Pacific, especially on ceremonial objects in the South Pacific. You'll see this pattern a lot. And it looks very complex because there's a lot of chips here. But it's relatively simple to do, and you can do it without doing any kind of layout. So I'm going to show you. I turned this smaller version, this little bud vase. So this has a hole in it and a little flask that you can put like a flower or something in. Just put that aside for now. So this is basswood, and it's a slightly tapered cylinder. And so I'm going to carve that pattern on this, but I'm not going to lay out the pattern first. I'm just going to do it with just the knife. So we're going to start with a row of triangles around here. And this will be, when this is finished, this is the top. And I'm starting at the top. You could start at either end, but I'm starting at the top because it's smaller. And whatever our first row of triangles looks like here, however large they are, that's going to determine sort of the layout and the size of the rest of the pattern. And I've found that if you start smaller, it's easier to get a little bit bigger than it is to start with larger triangles and shrink the pattern down. So I'm going to address all this stuff about grain direction here in just a second. What I'll do first is sort of decide where I want to put my first little triangle. And if you want to keep this, you want to keep the triangles spaced relatively evenly, one thing you can do is look at the grain at the top. And now this is, this is for carving on something round like this. I'm just going to zoom in real quick. See that. So you can sort of see the direction of the grain here. And that already gives you a little bit of help in laying things out because you can see opposite points in the grain. So let's say I wanted to, I'll start here where I can see the growth rings of the tree running out here. That gives me a point. And I'm just going to start with one triangle. I'm not going to put it right on the edge. I'm going to leave a little bit of space here because I don't want my knife to blow through the end grain. Also, this is a little bit different from a lot of the carving I do because I'm not carving a flat piece on a tabletop. This is, I'm carving in my lap. So it's a little bit trickier than carving something flat on a desk or a bench or something like that. But I'm going to make my first triangle about right here. Okay, so that's my first chip. And with this pattern, the way I carve the chips is I do 2 high angle cuts, and then the relief cut is a very low angle. And so what that does, it gives me a nice shadow, nice dark shadow up at the top of the triangle. Okay, so we got one triangle. Now you'll see that triangle is more or less lined up with the growth rings here. So I can sort of like flip this around and find approximately where a triangle would be directly across from it. I don't have to be perfect. In fact, it's just not going to be perfect because I'm doing this all by eye. I'm going to make a high angle cut, and I'm going to make another high angle cut, and then I'm going to make a low angle relief cut. Okay, so I've got two triangles, two triangular chips. And now I can do, I can take this, I can do that same thing on the sides. So I just sort of eyeball about where, halfway between these two chips on one side. And again, the growth rings are going to give me a little bit of a guide. So I'll start, I'll put it like right about there. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. Part of the beauty of this pattern is that the imperfection of how it's laid out, because you're laying it out by eye, kind of makes a nice, it shifts and undulates a little bit, and that's pretty nice, I think. So that's roughly halfway between. Not perfect, but that's okay. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go over on the opposite side, about right there. Do a high angle cut and another high angle cut. Okay, so I've got 4 triangles. And now that those give me some little milestones to use, visual references to help me space the rest of the triangles. So this space between 2 adjacent triangles, it doesn't really matter where you start. I'm going to fill this in. In fact, I'm going to fill all of these spaces in with more of these same triangles. And I'm going to space them by eye, but I'm going to leave a little bit of space between them. So I don't want the corners of my triangles to touch, and you'll see why. So I'm just going to start like right here. And I'll do a bunch of cuts for a number of triangles here. And let's see, about right there. And then I'll come back and do the other side of each triangle here. And I'll take all those out. And you can clean up along the way if you want, or you can leave it and come back and clean up everything in one go afterwards. And so you'll see what I'm going for here. I've got that first space sort of filled in, and none of my triangles are touching at their corners. A little bit of space between each one. So I'm going to do that again for these other 3 spaces. And if you want, you can, one thing you can do is like from this perspective, I can see a chip here and a chip here. And if I want to space these evenly, one thing I could do is just visually divide this space in half and put a triangle here and that gives me smaller spaces to divide up. So if you have a space that you have to fill up by eye that's like so long, if you divide that in half first, and then either divide it in half again or divide it in thirds or something, you can do that by eye pretty easily. And uh, sometimes it works a little bit better than just going one at a time. So let's see how many I have over here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'll have a couple more on this side. That's okay. Just make them a little bit smaller. I'll try to stay on camera here. This is pretty tricky doing it in my lap because I'm moving all over the place. Okay, so I'll just I'll do the rest of these and then show you the next step. And you can see I'm not being very particular. I'm not, my triangle, my chips are not spaced perfectly evenly. The line is a little bit wavy, but I don't really care for this pattern because I kind of like it to be a little bit wonky and organic. All right, so that establishes our starting point. And there's a couple ways you can proceed from here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another row of triangles. And the same way that I left space between all of these triangles are going to be oriented like this. So there's one. Let's see. Let me see that. Yeah. Okay. So the way that these have some space between them here, I'm going to leave some space here between this row and the next row as well. What that's going to do is it's going to create this diagonal grid line pattern that's part of this this carving pattern. So all those little spaces that we're leaving between, that is what gives us this crisscross grid. Oh, thank you, Zuzu's Petals. Thank you. And let's see, David says, in which order do you cut relative to the grain? I found some folks telling to cut first with the grain, other the opposite. It just depends. You know, with this piece, because just because of how I'm approaching it, the you know, all my triangles are oriented with the points up or down here, or they start with cuts that are on the points that are going up or down. So I'm making these cuts are sort of diagonal to the grain, like this. And then my relief cut goes across the grain. It really just depends on context. It's hard to make I can't give you a definite rule about that. It really just depends on the pattern you're carving, and how it's oriented to the grain. Okay, so this is where things can start moving a little bit faster. Like this started, you know, it took a while to get laid out or to get started. But what I can do now is just I'm lining up my first cut of each of these triangles with the point that's pointing down of this top row of triangles. I'm just going to make all of my first cuts for another row, leaving space between the points. And I'm not super worried about making them all exactly the same, but I am trying to get this angle. If you can see the angle that this cut is made at and the side of the triangle, I'm trying to get that angle about the same. Now I'm going to turn it around and make all of my cuts on the opposite side of those triangles. Try to stay in the center and stay focused here. It's a little tricky. Okay. Now I can take out all those chips. All right, so that's my second row. All right, so now I could either do another row of these triangles that are pointing up or down, or I can turn this and work on the row that's in between. But I'm going to go ahead and do at least one more here, this way so you can see the way this works. All right, so now I'm going to do another row of triangles, but these triangles are going to be oriented like this. And they're going to share this little ridge with the last row I just did. But the convenient thing now is that because I've established my spacing here, I know exactly where to make my cuts. Okay, so I'll do the cuts on the opposite side. Let's see. Trying to keep an eye on the chat here. Do you prefer a specific type of wood for your chip carving, or are you happy to work with a variety of woods? I do a lot of carving in basswood, which is what this is. It's not the only wood that you can chip carve. It's one of the easiest, and it's relatively cheap. It has a lot of good qualities as far as chip carving goes. It's tight grained. It's pretty straight grained. It's technically a hardwood, meaning it comes from a deciduous tree, the basswood tree or linden tree, or tilia is called in other places. It's a deciduous tree, so it's has leaves and not needles. So it's technically a hardwood, but it's a very soft hardwood. And it's very easy and friendly to carve. You can carve white pine, you can carve some cedars, poplar, birch, walnut if you really want to work for it. It's a much harder wood. Butternut, you can hypothetically chip carve any wood. But this technique where I'm using a knife like this, and I'm not, as opposed to like a chisel and a mallet that I would hit, there are some woods that this technique wouldn't work very well for. So this works well on softer woods. Take out all these. And carving on a curved surface like this is a little tough. It takes a little practice because when you think you might be making a straight line, it actually is, because it's over a curved surface. It's actually a curved line. All right, so it's my third row of triangular chips. And I'm going to do at least one more here before I start filling in. Okay, so again, now I'm going to reverse this pattern. So I'm going to make another double row like this, but I'm going to make it here. And again, I'm going to leave a little space here. So I'll put the top of this chip here. Do all my first cuts. And one thing you might, have thought about is that this piece that I'm carving, it's tapered, right? So every row that I carve, that circumference of the piece is a little bit It's a little bit bigger. So you can sort of start to shift the size of your chips up a little bit. Marcus Stratus, thank you for sharing. You're very welcome. Thanks for watching. Okay, so now I'll relieve all of those. Okay, so you can see what's starting to happen here. Is that every couple rows that I make, I'm creating these diamond-shaped spaces. And I'm going to fill those in eventually. So I can do that as I go down. In fact, I'll do that now. Or I could just continue carving these rows all the way down and then flip it and fill in all those diamonds all at once. But I will show you now. This is where the pattern really starts to pop out. Just clean up a little bit here and there. All right, so now I'm going to make a similar kind of chip, but they're going to be oriented this way. And again, I'm going to leave some space, but this is what my chips are going to look like. These are going to be running that way. So I'll do all my first cuts. All my second cuts. And again, I'm making these first two cuts for each triangle at a high angle. And when I come back to relieve them, to pop them out, I'll do that final cut at a low angle. Okay. Okay, so there's the first. Let me see if I can get this turned to the light so you can see what's going on there. There's the first batch of chips for that row of diamonds. I'll just turn it around and do the same thing on the opposite side. Sorry if I'm getting off camera here a little bit, out of the frame. It's pretty hard to pay attention to what I'm doing and stay in the frame here. Just focus again. Okay, so now I'll come back and make all my relief cuts, and we'll see the first sort of look at this pattern popping out here. All right, so you can see, let me see if I can get this a little closer. So that's what we're going for. And so now I'll do the same thing in these spaces. And you can really see, like I said, how sort of organic and really irregular the lines are. But when you fill up the entire piece, all of those little irregularities, they just kind of average out and give you this nice grid pattern. And I mean, it's not perfect. The lines are not perfectly straight, but they are pleasant to look at. They catch the light, and it becomes kind of more of a texture than a pattern visually. So I'll just keep on going for a little bit here. Excellent texture on a tool handle. Yeah, you could do it on a tool handle. Yeah, if your tool handle was soft enough to carve, well, you could probably do it on if the grain was nice and straight, even in a harder wood like maple or something. I think you would have a hard time. A lot of tool handles are made out of hickory. At least in the United States, they are. And hickory is just a very, very hard wood. Uh, wouldn't be impossible, but it would be pretty challenging. Yeah, one of the things that one of the objects you see decorated with this pattern are ceremonial paddles from the South Pacific island nations. It's interesting because you see this same pattern all over the place. I've seen it on the ceremonial objects from the South Pacific. I've seen it on objects from Congo, like in Central Africa, bowls and wooden bowls and cups, headdresses and masks. I've seen it on all sorts of things from Europe, especially like the Netherlands and other places in Eastern Europe and Romania. I think I mentioned before, in Romania, they call this pattern, I have a Romanian follower on Instagram told me that they call this the wolf's teeth pattern. So I had never heard that before. I don't know, what it is in Romanian, or if that's a direct translation or what, but it's a very common one around the world. And I wonder if it's common because, like I'm doing here, I didn't have to lay out a bunch of fancy geometry or break out, you know, anything special. I mean, I just sort of dug into it here with my knife, and I'm not even being particularly careful about how I'm spacing things. You could be, if you carve this, if you got some practice carving this, you could make it pretty darn perfect. And then if you wanted to do a little bit of layout, just draw some lines down the piece or space the rows, with a ruler or something. You could make it, very regular and sort of uh, geometrically perfect pretty easily. so looks like we just have 3 people still watching, maybe. I'm curious, the 3 of you watching, did you hear about this on Instagram? Do you follow me on Instagram? If so, just say hi in the chat. Make sure Oh, cool. Okay, so Marcus says YouTube subscriber and got a live stream notification. Great. Well, thanks for subscribing. I appreciate it. I haven't been using YouTube much recently, but I want to change that. I think I'm going to start doing these on a fairly regular basis, these live carving demos. And some other videos. All right, so there is my just the first couple rows of the pattern starting to appear. And so you can see it, it doesn't go super quick, but I've also been stopping and talking and not going quite as fast as I normally might be carving if I were carving at home, but it progresses pretty quickly, and all you have to do is, just get good at these little triangular chips. And once you lay out that first row, that sort of gives you the spacing. And if you keep them spaced, more or less pretty well, with a little bit of space between their corners, from side to side and up to down, top to bottom, you get this zigzag grid that begins to emerge. So that's the general idea, and I would just keep on going. So my next row, I would go back, just going this way. And do another row here. One thing I think I'm going to try some point is I've seen stone carvers, if they're carving something that's not flat, they'll put like a bag, like a sandbag, on their bench top, or I don't know if they ever work in their lap. I doubt it, but this is a little tricky working in my lap here, and keep trying to keep it on camera. That's really the hard part. I don't have too much trouble carving this if I'm scrunched up like this and can sort of stabilize everything, but like trying to keep it in the right spot for the camera is difficult. But I do think maybe having like a sandbag that I could put on a table to keep things relatively stable if I'm carving something round, I might give that a shot. See, some of these I'm having to clean up a little bit more than others. It's easy to get for the curved surface when you're carving something round to sort of fool you into thinking that you're making the cut at the right angle, because it feels right in the way that it would feel right to if you were carving something flat, but the curve is kind of deceptive. Ooh, shit. I think I lost my camera. Hopefully I'll come back online here in a second. There it is. Okay. Dead battery. Yep. Yeah. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know if you may have seen on Instagram, if you saw this, me advertise this in a post on Instagram. This is a little bit of a trial run for me because I've only like played around with YouTube Live, so just sort of still getting my little rig here worked out. Clearly, I need to get a DC adapter for my camera, so I'm not running on battery power. Anyway, so that is the basic idea. And you just keep doing alternating rows of these triangles back to back all the way down. And this is eventually what you end up with. This one took, I don't know. I didn't really watch the clock or time it or anything, but probably 5 or 6 hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours. I'm not sure. This pattern is a good sort of mindless, like, activity. It doesn't really take a whole lot of thought once you get the basic, pattern down and get it started. You can just kind of zone out and carve. It's pretty nice. All right, so that's it for me for today, and I appreciate everyone checking this out. And I'm going to do more of these in the future. And I might even get brave enough to put my face on camera at some point, although it's not my favorite thing to do. But anyway, thanks for following and subscribing and liking and all that stuff. And the best place to find me is on YouTube. I'm sorry, on Instagram. I'm really active on Instagram, post a lot of stuff there. I also have a Patreon. Just search Daniel Clay Woodworking on Patreon if you're interested in learning more about carving. Yeah. Oh, and my book. I released a book in August. So you can find all those links probably on Instagram is the best place, or on my website. You can buy my book directly from me, and carving kits and all that kind of stuff. And I will be back to do more of this. I'm going to try to make this a weekly thing. So please stay tuned. Keep an eye out. And thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a nice Sunday.